One of the hottest debates in drug policy is over the concept of harm reduction, which many people see as a middle ground between prohibition and outright legalization of drugs. Harm reduction programs focus on finding a way to reduce the negative impacts of drugs on both the user and the community. Needle exchange programs, for example, distribute clean needles to injection drug users in an attempt to reduce the spread of bloodborne pathogens such as HIV/AIDS and hepatitis C. While support for needle exchange is growing, both domestically and internationally, the Bush administration strongly opposes these programs. We asked Dr. Nadelmann and Dr. Murray to weigh in.
How are we supposed to reduce drug use and the ravages of drug use, including HIV/AIDS transmission, hepatitis C transmission, by what is potentially sustaining people in their continued drug use? Many parties have come to a recognition that the so-called harm reduction programs just sustain people in continued drug use, do not make the effort to get them off of drugs, do not reduce the vulnerabilities and the risks these people are running.
It's almost impossible to find a respected scientific advisory body. The National Academy of Science, National Institute of Health, the World Health Organization, the former President Clinton's HIV/AIDS Commission, the former President Bush's HIV/AIDS Commission, every single one of which has found that needle exchange programs reduce the spread of HIV/AIDS without increasing drug abuse. It seems to me that the argument for not funding such programs and implementing them and generally making sterile syringes more readily available through pharmacies and needle exchange programs, the argument against doing that has to be the morally reprehensible one. Because that's the argument that says if somebody shoots drugs, better off to let them die. And if they happen to infect their children and others around them at the same time, better off to let them die as well. To me, the immorality of the drug czar's office in America is a monstrosity. It's got no respect whatsoever for scientific evidence. It has no credibility in the scientific world. It's essentially a morally bankrupt institution that's afraid to come out into debate or defend its policies in any scientifically credible audience anywhere in the world.
Heroin maintenance programs are another example of harm reduction efforts. These programs offer controlled environments in which addicts can inject prescription heroin. Advocates say heroin maintenance reduces crime as well as other negative aspects of drug use. More and more countries, such as Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and most recently Canada, are experimenting with heroin maintenance to varying degrees. Nevertheless, these programs remain highly controversial.
The remarkable thing about heroin maintenance is when it was first talked about in Switzerland in the early 1990s, everybody was, oh my God, should we give the junkies heroin and should the state be paying for this sort of thing? What eventually happened was that these trials proved so incredibly successful that they won the support of major law enforcement, and they were then put to referendum so that the public ended up supporting them. Then they did a cost-benefit analysis of these things because people were worried about the cost, and they found that the cost of these heroin maintenance programs was more than paid for by the reduction in criminal justice costs and health costs from treating addiction as a criminal offense. We should be doing it now. Unfortunately, it's going to take, as did needle exchange, 10 or 15 years until it becomes much more acceptable. It's sad. Ultimately, I believe that science and reason will prevail, but it's a tragedy how many people will die and suffer needlessly in the interim.
And what does harm reduction offer? Well, they offer safe injection facilities. Safe, they say, where you go in and the society, with federal tax dollars, provides you with a place where you can continue to shoot up under supervision. Many people find that objectionable, both morally and from a public health point of view, because you're enabling and sustaining illegal drug use, and even if it's sanctioned in that context, is devastating for the person who does it. You wouldn't do it for your brother or your sister, put them down in the basement and say, we're going to supervise your injection. Here's your heroin for today, and make no effort to get them off of heroin. Let's go visit the facility in Amsterdam where people distribute heroin to heroin users under supervised conditions. What does it actually look like? Well, they had about 4,000 people they were, quote, treating for heroin addiction with heroin. Not with methadone, not with buprenorphine, not with heroin substitutes that could actually get people off of their heroin habit. They had no goal to get people off their heroin habit. They just wanted to sustain them as long as they were quiet and weren't out on the streets disturbing the tourists. So every day someone comes into the facility, they call it daycare, and they're provided heroin during the day to inject. So well, what happens at night when they go back out on the street? Do these people sometimes engage in criminal behavior? Do they get illegal heroin? And the doctor running the program says, oh no dear, they would never do that. Well, why is that? How does this work so effectively? Because you see, if they don't behave well, we just cut off their heroin. Think about that for a moment. If you have any sense of what a citizen is, any sense of liberty and personal responsibility, any sense of the proper relationship between a citizen and their government, if the government itself is the provider of an addictive, powerful leash on you that can be cut off at the government's whim, that's addiction indeed.